Hi everyone, I'm Rockin' Robin from CookingMexicanRecipes.com. Now today I'm so excited, I am making Italian cookies, also known as biscotti. Now this recipe comes from my great grandmother-in-law. So that would be my husband's great-grandmother. Now this lady, I tell you, she's from Italy and she really knew how to cook. So I'm really excited about sharing this recipe with you today. So let's go over all of our ingredients. Okay, so we're going to need some flour, probably about 4½ cups. We'll need some granulated sugar. We'll need 4 eggs. And now here I've got some Crisco and some butter, real butter. Baking powder. We'll need some salt. And here's some chopped walnuts. Now the next ingredient may surprise you a bit. Well, we're going to be using either whiskey or brandy, so I have some here. And we'll also need some sweet vermouth, vanilla extract, pure almond extract, and anise extract. So our recipe calls for double sifting our flour. So get yourself a piece of wax paper and place it down there. It'll help keep the mess to a minimum. And I'm going to go ahead and fill up my sifter with some flour. And then I'm just going to measure out a cup at a time and place it in another bowl. Okay, so just sit your cup under there and start sifting into it. Get a straight edge and just level it off, pour it into your bowl, and just keep doing that until you get 4 cups. All right, so now we're down to our last ½ a cup. We don't want to pack it down, so do it gently and just set it into your bowl. And we're going to sift that again as well in a minute. So what's nice about using the wax paper is when you're done with your flour, you can just easily pick it all up like this and pour it back into your flour container. It just makes cleanup a lot easier. Now our next step is to combine the flour with the salt and the baking powder. Now this is where we're going to double sift again. So I'm going to start adding my flour, and we're going to first we'll put our sifter in the bowl. Okay, so that way we don't lose anything here. All right, so we start placing our flour into the sifter. And I might be able to get most of it in. I'm going to add the salt. I'm going to sprinkle the salt in there. And the baking powder. Always check your expiration date on that baking powder too. It doesn't really seem to last that long. The expirations are maybe a year, couple years maybe. And it can kind of sneak up on you, and next thing you know, it's expired. And then it won't work as well in your baking. Okay, I think I can get it all in here. I'm going to gently put it in there, and then we'll do our final sift. So just sift everything into your new bowl. Keep it nice and light. That's why you double sift it. And that's it, and we'll set this aside. So I'm going to be using a KitchenAid mixer because this batter is going to be really, really thick. Now the other alternative is if you don't have one of these, obviously you can do it by hand. That's how I used to do it until I got this. But don't try and use one of those hand mixers because they're not powerful enough to handle this kind of dough. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do here is we are going to just cream the butter and the Crisco together. So we'll just add our butter to the mixing bowl and the Crisco and turn it on. And this will take just a minute or two. Okay, so once your butter and Crisco is mixed up pretty well, just like this, we're going to start adding sugar and an egg at a time. So we'll alternate that. I'll show you in just a second. Okay, so now we're ready to add, I'm going to break open an egg one at a time into the bowl just to make sure that it's in good shape and it's not rotten or anything like that, because if you were to pour it in there, then you've ruined your whole thing. So I'm pouring it in here first. I'm going to turn this on slow, and we're going to alternate between sugar and an egg. So I'm going to add a spoonful of sugar, maybe a little extra, and then I'm going to throw in the egg. Once that incorporates into the mixture, I'm going to do the second egg, and then the third, and then the fourth. Each time I add an egg, I'm going to add more sugar. Okay, so we're down to our last egg. Shut your machine off for a minute. Just scrape down the sides. That way you ensure that everything gets mixed in well, because sometimes it gets pushed up. And then we'll add our last egg and our little bit of sugar that's left. And also, you know, if you happen to get a shell in your bowl, it's a lot easier to get it out of this bowl than it would be trying to get it out of this bowl. And then we've got our last bit of sugar to add. So now we're ready to add all the flavorings and the flour. Now we're going to alternate the flour and all the flavorings, meaning the whiskey, the vermouth, and all of the extracts. So I have combined those all together right here in this little cup. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this on and we're going to alternate flour. I'm going to add a little flour first. And just a little bit, actually I think I'll turn that off. I'll add just a little bit at a time, sprinkle it around, maybe 2 scoops. And then I'm going to add some of the liquid. Now don't worry about the whiskey and the vermouth in this. It's going to cook out, so it's not like it's going to be like a super potent cookie and get somebody drunk or anything like that. So we're just going to go back and forth alternating until we get it all incorporated. Now before I add the nuts, I'm going to let this blend up really nice. I'm going to scrape down the sides, make sure everything's incorporated. Get all the flour that may be stuck on the beater there, scrape down the side one time, and then we'll mix in our nuts, and that'll be our last addition of anything left in the recipe. That looks good. Now we'll just pour in our walnuts. Mix that on slow, and that should about do it. Okay, so now we're ready to start baking. Now, first of all, you're going to need a nice cookie sheet. I have a nice large one here, and you have a couple of options. Now, I'm using parchment paper, but if you don't have that, you can use Crisco shortening. You can just grease up your pan really well, and that'll work too. Now is the time that you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, and now we're going to go ahead and start placing the dough onto our cookie sheet. All right, so this is how we're going to do this. Take a spoonful, and you're going to make, basically we're going to make 3 logs going down the paper. Now, notice that your parchment paper, my parchment paper, is moving around a bit. So I'm going to use a piece of tape just temporarily to kind of hold it in place so that it's not moving all over on me. And then you make sure you take that off before you place it in the oven. Okay, so what we want to do here is create 2 long, I'll call them logs. And they're about, I don't know, 1/2 inch tall and about 2 inches wide. Now if you like your biscotti or your Italian cookies really large, like you see them in the store sometimes, the way you achieve that is by making your logs a little bit wider, so maybe 3 inches wide, and then you'll end up with a really big cookie. I usually do mine a little smaller, just that's how we roll, so whatever works for you, you can play with it. So you can see I'm just putting a scoop on there. I'm using my finger and the spoon just to spread it out and get it about 2 inches wide and about 1/2 inch tall. Okay, so you can see here that I got my rack in the top half of the oven. And place those cookies in there, and we'll check it in 15 minutes. Okay, so I checked on the cookies at 15 minutes and they weren't quite brown enough for me, so I put them back in for about 3 more minutes. Now I've taken them out. I'm setting down here on the counter to cool. You can see how much they've kind of risen and spread it out. They spread out quite a bit. And after they cool, we're going to go ahead and slice them, and then we have to go ahead and toast them once again. Now I'm ready to go ahead and start slicing up the cookies. I want to show you how to do this. You cut them on an angle. All right, so we'll start. Okay, so I cut off the end, and that's still certainly good to eat. And then you're just going to you can make these as large as you want. I typically go about, I don't know, a little larger than 1/2 inch. And you just keep cutting right down the line. And I move them just a little bit. So I slice it, and then I kind of push it down just a little bit. And you can see they get to be pretty good sized cookies. And just go ahead, and typically I get about 5 to 6 dozen. Normally, I'll get close to 6 dozen, cutting them, reasonably good size. I don't make them real giant. Okay, so now once you've cut a row, you can turn it over on its side. They're still pretty soft, they're not real crispy yet. That's why they have to go back in the oven. So we're going to just turn these over gently. Otherwise it gets a little bit crowded. And then once I get them all on their side, then they're going to go back in the oven for about probably 6 to 8 minutes, let's say. And then we're going to flip them on to the other side and do the same thing. Okay, so here are the cookies after the first 8 minutes on one side. So now I'm going to take them out and flip them over and cook them for another 8 minutes or so. All right, so the Italian cookies or the biscotti are done. They've been cooling over here on my counter. And here's something you can do with them if you want to. Now, if you're like me and you like chocolate, you might want to get a double boiler and melt some chocolate chips, add a little shortening to it, and to thin it out a little bit, and you can drizzle it over them if you want to. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But it's an option if you love chocolate, and you can use any kind of chocolate, white, dark, milk chocolate. I like them all. And so you can butter it across the top, you can dip them in, you can do whatever you want. So that's an option for you. So these cookies last a long time. They are crunchy, and that's the way they're meant to be. They're good for dunking in your coffee or hot chocolate, whatever you like. And they keep well in the freezer, so whenever you have guests, you can bring them out. And they just hold up really, really well. So I hope you'll try Great Nana's Italian cookies. They really are delicious. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure and subscribe to my channel by clicking that button right up there and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And I want to wish you and your family a very happy holiday, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.